And yes, welcome to our second demonstration, a demonstration where we're going to be looking at configuring DNS more for our enterprise. And what we mean by that is that we're going to have our central DNS server, Ubuntu 2. It is this system and only this system that needs to venture out to the internet and the dangerous place that might be to go through and do name queries. It can act as a query agent for our other devices on the network, such as Ubuntu 1. And we're going to configure Ubuntu 1 to use Ubuntu 2 as its DNS server. As I say, this becomes really important because we can keep most of our clients away from the internet for name resolution and have that done by a dedicated server. Come on, join me at the command line. And look at this, we're back on our Ubuntu 2, the glorious command line that is about to be our bind DNS server. We need to, of course, start by installing the required packages, and we're going to begin by elevating our privileges and apt install -y so it doesn't prompt us, and then the package we really need is bind 9. But we'll also put in some of our management utilities, so bind 9 utils, and go on, let's be really drastic and add in our documentation. Now, I know we're never going to read the documentation, but it always looks good if we've installed the documentation, doesn't it? But there you go, it's installed and our service will be up and running. So everything will be good. But of course, we've got to edit our local client as well as our other clients to make sure they use this DNS server. It's no point just putting a DNS server on. Now, getting used to some of our shortcuts at the command line can be useful both in real life as well, of course, any practical exam. So I can use Control and R to reverse search my history. And then if I kind of think that I need to edit that YAML file, well, what is going to identify the command? Well, if I just type YAML, that's going to take me to my YAML file. So you can see the command sudo vim etc netplan 50-cloudinit-yaml, and I just typed YAM after the Control and R. Hit my enter key. Now I need to make a couple of changes here. I'm going to delete the list entries that I have for my addresses, so 2DD. At the end of my addresses line, I'm going to go through and just put a single item list, and that's going to be 127.0.0.1. I can close off my brackets, and this is the configuration done. We now want to point back to our local host on the address 127.0.0.1. We can hit escape, and X to save our changes, and then just using Control and R and look for the apply again, hit enter. Now we should be good to go with this. If I go through and cat out /etc/resolve, we can see now that we're pointing through to our local name server, and we can check that it is working using Control and L, and then going through and just running my dig command again, and then making sure that we are querying the local server 127.0.0.1. So this is great. We are up and running with our DNS client, but maybe we're not quite where we need to be as far as our DNS server is concerned. Let me show you. Let's begin by clearing our screen. And if I then use ss-ntl, and when we take a look at, now I know we're only looking at TCP here, but we are listening on port 53, but we are listening then on all of our interfaces, both IP version 4 and IP version 6. And maybe we're not using IP version 6, and in that case, we really then shouldn't be listening on IP version 6. So we can go through and configure to listen on IP version 4 only. It's a relatively easy way to set this up. I'm going to use sudo and vim. As always, though, use whatever editor works with you. etc/default. And then when we go through, we can look then at our named file for our name daemon. And we've got our options here. And we've got our options that exist at the moment. And we can see then that we're running -u and bind, so specifying our user. I use uppercase A, that's appending at the end of the line, but I can move back within my quotes. And we can then specify that we only want IP version 4. So just put the option -4 in. We can go through and save this. And with this saved, we can go through and restart our service. So I can clear my screen and then sudo systemctl and restart bind 9. Now, if I go back and revisit those listening ports, and when we go through and take a look at the output, we can see now that port 53 is only being used against the IP version 4 addresses. So we're up and running as far as this is concerned, and we are good to go. But of course, we also need to look at configuring our Ubuntu One client to pick up this correct information. So moving across to our Ubuntu One client, we can run through the same or very similar configuration that we made on Ubuntu 2 for our DNS client. Using our preferred editor, we can go through and open up our net plan and then our 50-cloud config, or whichever configuration file your system uses for the DHCP interface. Don't forget, I'm going to go through and hit escape and colon, set TS equals 2, shift width equals 2, just so it's working better with the YAML configuration that I've got. And then I can move through, appending to my DHCP4 line. And then we add in DHCP4-overrides. And inside of this, we need to have our use-DNS, and that's going to be false. Moving back to level with match, we can add in our name servers. So this is a dictionary, a group of key value pairs, and we're going to have our addresses. So we know that we belong to name servers. We are indented inside of name servers, and we're just going to have a single entry in here. So I can put 192.168.56.102, the IP address of your Ubuntu 2 system. And we want our search domain to be, so we're going to go through and put our search to be the local domain. So local. And again, that's a list, but we only need the single value. Once we're ready, we can go through and save this. And then run our sudo and net plan apply. Now that's made our configuration, but it's not going to be read by our resolve.conf. We've got to relink that. So sudo ln -sf, so we can replace the existing resolve.conf. Our link target comes first, so that's going to be /run/systemd and then resolve and then our resolve.conf. And that's going to be linked through to the etc and the existing resolve.conf. The force option allows me to replace the etc resolve.conf if it exists. Now, as I go through and cat the last argument, we can see that we are pointing through to the right server, and then just using our dig command, we should be able to see that we're retrieving the information from the server 192.168.56.102. So we've been able to configure our client to successfully retrieve information from our DNS server, the DNS server that is sitting on Ubuntu 2.